Hey, it's the Road Show.
Hi.
Lineup tonight. Yeah. What's up, guys? Lindsay,
Hey, guys.
Dan.
Hey, guys.
Yeah. Good
How's
to
it
see you.
going?
Good. It's been a minute, hasn't it? Feels like it's
I
been
know.
forever since we recorded last.
I've missed you
Because-
guys.
Same. And Ryan, I think it feels like it's been a minute because you've had so many adventures recently.
It's been crazy. I put a reel on Instagram like, whose life is this? But that's how
Yeah.
I've felt lately. I have been so fortunate to fall into some really neat things lately, and I guess we'll go back in time. The big one for me, I was telling you before we hit record, I'm starting to look forward to this thing like I do, like the holidays or whatever. It's the Colorado Grand, and
Giving Christmas a run for its money. As
oh
far as
man,
your favorite
it's
day.
like Christmas for a week, right? Every day for a week. It is just this is something, guys. I was fortunate enough to get involved with a few years ago. Become very good friends with the chair of the Grand, longtime chair, Tom Horan, and he's got me involved in this thing, and now it's just it's gotten under my skin. It is. If you
I was
don't
going to say
know,
it's part of you.
it is. It's like part of my identity. Like it really is. Like this is
But
like
in a
one of
good
my
way.
go-to Absolutely. It's such a neat event. If you don't know the Grand, it's 1,000 miles, give or take, in 1960 and earlier sports and racing cars for the most part. And so it's some of the best roads Chicago has to offer, Colorado has to offer, and some of the surrounding states. And
The scenery was absolutely stunning. The pictures you posted.
And the cars, we're just fresh off a car week, and some of the cars we saw at Pebble, and at the Quail are now driving 1,000 miles, right?
I didn't realize it was that many miles too. That's incredible.
Over 4 days.
That's a long
And does
time
the route-
in a modern car.
Does the route change every year?
It does. Now, it's a good question. So this year we took more of a southern route. And so we started in Vail, and we went down, spent a couple nights in Telluride, which is got to be one of the
gorgeous
prettiest
there.
parts of the state. Absolutely. And then we continued on through Durango and Grand Junction and Moab, Utah, ended up back again.
Just stunning
in
also.
Vail several days later. But it was just, guys, the cars. Can we talk about the cars?
Yes,
Okay.
please.
All right.
Well, and so when you're doing, like, if you're staying the same place more than two, do you do basically like a day trip from there? Like the 2 nights in Telluride?
Exactly. We did a loop that day because, that's just, again, one of the prettiest parts of the state with some of the best roads. I think that was the day we did what they call that was the next day. The $1 million. We'll get to that. But it was.
We'll get there.
Yeah, the cars, the people, it's all the stuff that you usually just see in books, magazines, websites, whatever, and it's
And you
not
got
only
to
there
live
for
it.
people. The best garage in the world, or the best traffic jam, or whatever you want to call it, right? Is on the Grand.
The traffic jam of dreams.
Yeah, it's just, you talk about what cars are on the Grand, and every year they have what's called a feature car. And last year, the feature car was a 73 and 74 Porsche RS. And the feature car is meant to be a car that maybe isn't represented or doesn't fall into the parameters of the 60 and earlier. Wouldn't necessarily be an eligible car. This year it was an eligible car, but a car that you don't see a lot of. Isn't that? It's actually 2 cars. It's the Alfa Romeo 6C and 8C. So these are like the pre-war Alphas that what's so interesting about them is, they were built by Alfa, but then they were rebodied by something like a dozen different coach builders. Some of these cars are more like touring cars. Some are more like race cars. Some are race cars. There was a car that everyone asked, why does that Alfa have Scuderia Ferrari, shields on it, right? Well, that's because that was Enzo's race car before he founded the Ferrari company, right? That was it was just so... That was just the feature car. So the cars, these Alfa Romeo 6Cs and 8Cs were just amazing. Cars that have palpable history. The Mercedes 300 SL, both the Roadster and the Gullwing, are always a staple, right? And each year we probably have 10 or 12 of those different combinations. Porsche 356s, but Porsche 356s in that cars with race provenance are very special cars, or Emerys or whatever. We had I would get these big WO Bentley, the blower Bentleys and things like that. The 4.5 liter cars,
And they're driving 1,000 miles.
1,000 miles, and that's a different level of commitment. It's one thing if you're in a Gullwing, right? It's another thing if you're in a 30s Bentley, through all the weather and everything else, and cars that you don't see every day, Allards and Arnolds and and Heelys, and we had a BMW 507, and
Nice.
I'm going down the list here. Launches, some of these very special launches, the B20s and the B24s, Maserati, birdcage cars, Seatas. We do have a board member who has a Shelby, a 427 Cobra that because he's on the board, even though it's a little new, right?
He can grandfather it in.
He can grandfather in. So that's an awesome car. Talbot Lagos,
I love those so much.
It's just the best of the best cars, and again, it's one thing to see these cars in a museum. It's another thing to see them drive, and it's another thing to see people, working on them. It's another, just the smells of the garage. It's just an amazing event. We had beautiful weather. The roads are great. The hotels are nice. The meals were great. Again, I mean, it was like living a dream for a week of just, exposure to that. And so my involvement, as you guys know, is I'd write the car descriptions for the route book. So the route book is this integral part, of the rally. It's got all the routes. We have a guy, shout out Alan, who does the actual route descriptions, and he gives bits of history on these towns that we're going through, mining towns and mountain towns.
Oh, that's so cool.
And other, which is cool. And then, so that's my big contribution. And then I kind of just help around in general. But one of my duties is I get to drive Mercedes-Benz. Mike Coons in the Classic Center, they come to support their own cars and also customer cars, and then they always bring along with them 6 or 8 brand new AMG Mercedes cars.
That's what I was going to ask you about. So is there a Classic Center in Colorado?
No, they actually come from Long Beach, right? So Dan and I interviewed Mike Coons on the steering committee.
Oh, fun.
And really a great guy. He's such a neat guy. Talk about living the dream. He started out as a technical writer for Mercedes in New Jersey right out of college, but because he spoke German and I think he was a journalism or English student, it was just he found this role in the newspaper, and that's grown into what he does today, which is I think he's the founder of the Classic Center. There was always a Classic Center in Germany, right?
But he spearheaded the one in the States.
Made a case for it, yeah, and now runs the thing, and it's just supporting these rallies is a big part of it, obviously, along with their restoration duties and their parts business and everything else. If you're ever in Long Beach, right, Dan, you got to check out the Classic Center.
I haven't been yet, and it is on my list. I mean, what an incredible career unfolding. If you had told him just out of college this is where his life was going to go, that's pretty amazing.
Absolutely, yeah. That's why you got to follow your dreams, right?
True.
But Dan, yeah, they've got this. It's open to the public. Right, the showroom, I'm trying to remember what was their last multiple 300 SLs, a lightweight.
There was the rare lightweight, wasn't there, which they made very few of. And if I remember rightly, there's also big glass windows so you can look into the bays where they're actually restoring these cars.
Mm-hmm. That's super cool.
So, definitely worth a visit.
Yeah, it's really interesting because obviously, they're doing 300 SLs and things like that. But, it's 2024. So some of what are now classics are cars that we grew up with as kids, right? So, I remember seeing the world's most pristine 300 CE, is that a 124 or whatever? I think the coupe had its own code, but, cars like that, they do leather work, they do paint. It's just, it's amazing work. And Mike is the real deal, nice guy. But the coolest thing, guys, that they brought out this year was it was a sedan, and I can't remember the model. This was like a 60s, one of those finned Mercedes sedans, if you recall. Yeah. Back in the day, there was a woman who entered some rally, and I don't remember if it wasn't the Carrera Panamera, but it was something along those lines. And she won. No one thought she would, even finish, and she won the thing.
That's amazing.
The car was lost to time. She was still alive a couple of years ago. Dan, we saw this car at the Classic Center when they were working on it. At that time, it was just a shell, and they were able to marry a 300 SL powertrain. There's a whole story there. I'll let Mike come on and tell that story sometime. And so they were campaigning this car. Unfortunately, the woman, the race car driver, died just before this car was finished, but she knew that it was going on. I think they were going to present it to her, something like that, and she didn't make it long enough, unfortunately. But that was one of my favorite cars because here you saw this very staid sort of 1960s Finn, early 60s I guess, Mercedes sedan, just ripping, just like blowing smoke and everything else, and it had a 300 SL powertrain. So this is the alchemy that they do at Mercedes-Benz Classic Center. But and the people, just the quality people, just wonderful people really, all these names you'd recognize, right? Like people, the potential guest list there is
right.
is a deep
it's
one.
a who's who for sure.
It's a deep pool of people that you just want to talk to, right? You know, the movers and shakers in the automotive world. And Dan, I think you had some questions around kind of the process of kind of, you know, how does one get into the Grand and kind of the...
So it sounds like it's 60s and prior.
Yeah, 1960 exactly and prior, yeah.
So how do you stop, I don't know, how do you stop a whole fleet of 356s?
That's a great question.
Like, what's the process to get, do you have to be approved to go on the Grand? Or?
Well, and I will say I'm not an official spokesperson of the Grand. We'll get Tom on Sunday, Tom Horan, the chair. But I'd like to think that I'm a small part of it and have a little insight. And so, you know, that's always an issue, right? Because there are a lot of 356s out there, and the early ones do qualify. And oftentimes people will have I guess a more quote unquote interesting car. But,
with like a significant history,
a more significant car, but then, you know, either they can't, you know, there's an issue or there's always a reason they can't bring it on the Grand, and then they'll ask if they can, you know, replace the car with their 356, right? So that can be their substitution. And so every year, we do end up with a lot of 356s, and then it sort of becomes more of again, does the car have race provenance? Is it a rare car, right? Is it a you know, a particularly early car? The thing with the 356s, though, is that, you know, we're at altitude and we're doing 12,000 plus foot passes, right, in these cars, and those early 356s, you know, that's double-digit horsepower, and so, you know, it is as cool as those cars are. They're maybe not the ideal cars. I understand it, right? You want something with a little more power,
right?
I rode this Allard that Tom drove in the Grand for 15 years, recently changed hands to another Grander, who then let Tom drive it in the Grand again this year. And I got
that sounds like the perfect scenario.
That's it, right? You know, it's like this 4x4 thing I was doing yesterday. I'll tell you about. There's no better 4x4ing, you know, than when you're in someone else's vehicle, right? Or no better track day than when you're in someone else's car, right?
Exactly.
But 1,000 miles in this thing, and if you don't know about Allards, it's a British car, and they were generally either powered by a Cadillac engine or a Chrysler Hemi, and they have very similar power. It's you know, sort of your preference. This one had a Chrysler, and you know, you're going really, really fast in a car from 1952. You know, it's a very, very different experience. But that car has a better power to weight ratio than a Lotus Elise, I discovered. So it's like, so there are old cars with big power, and as wonderful as the 356 is, you know, I think your average off the shelf 356 is probably not your best candidate. But to answer your question, Dan, you know, there is a board, you know, committee that looks at the cars. They look at past participation in other events. You know, the owner. You know, it's just you know, your motivations, right? What do you contribute about the car? So when I say I write the car descriptions, it's not quite accurate. I'm more of an editor, and that's actually my title, I guess, as contributing editor, because some people supply too much information. They're passionate about their cars, right? And
which is so fun because you can kind of feel the excitement where you go, you know, like that. I did that of a fashion for some of the Haggerty events, and there was one. Yeah. It was. We had two basically fun facts, and I remember getting a page and a half about one of the Cobras, and going, "Okay, this is going to be interesting. You know, it's a challenge to cut it down, but the enthusiasm is so fun to see, which I'm sure you know, and you're creating a real keepsake for people who participate in the event. I'm sure everybody hangs on to those books." You know, absolutely right. There are people that have a whole shelf of them, right? I'm sure.
You know, absolutely. It's you know, a mark of time, right? You know, passing. You know,
that's
for
really
a lot of
special.
These people, and it is, and you know, and you've got to be accurate the best you can, and all this, and you know, and then you've got those entries. There are other people that maybe just bought the car, like I said, at auction. You know, 2 weeks before. They don't know the first thing about the car, so that's up to you to come up with more of a story. And when you do have, you know, 10. You know, Alpha 6Cs and 8Cs or 10 356s or 300 SLs, you know, you do try to, you know, create more of a story, but most of these cars have more than enough story. You know, I posted a picture on Instagram of me in I think it was a 1932 Alpha 6C that had been owned by the head of, or the secretary of the fascist party in Italy. You know, I mean, it's like these cars, I mean, that was an unrestored car, right? You know, I mean, that
really?
Just think of who's, all the bottoms that have been in that seat, right? The hands that have been on that steering wheel. And that's a lot of the cars. You walk into that garage, guys, and it's just like, there's a living, breathing kind of like thing there.
There's an energy, and it's
pretty wild.
Yeah,
but
it's like a candy store.
Yeah.
In terms of tactics, then, to get a car approved, variety. So going for something that no one else is going to submit is probably going to put me in a good place.
That's it.
If the car has raced historically, is that a good... I'm going to have to get a lottery ticket, aren't I?
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's always the question for people like me, right, who have an interest but don't necessarily have the bank account, right? What's a car that's relatively modest in price, but is a car that's that's interesting, that has it's bringing something to the show, right? Bringing a story to the event, and
because I would imagine that's part of the consideration of the application process is they look at the comprehensive field and say, okay, where does this fit in? Do we have 6 of these, like you said? Are we creating an interesting overall participation?
That's it, exactly. And I should say, too, that it's not just about the car. It's as much about the person. And, these are true enthusiasts, right? This is an event, a car event, but at the end of the day, it's like a lot of car events, good car events. It's about the camaraderie, right? And the atmosphere and the times you're going to have together, right? So, I would say that that's probably even more important, it seems to me, than the car. But I've asked that question.
That could make or break it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I got to say, it's a wonderful group of people, right? Like, it's
just
a great group of people, right? It is fun, you're right. No one talks politics. No one talks, but it's just about what's the event up in Northern California, right on the Russian River, they go out to the redwoods, and why can't I think of the name of it?
What are they? Is it a car event?
No. It's like it's a secret society kind of thing. I'll edit this out. Sorry, bear with me. It's
do they have outfits and secret handshakes?
Yeah, hang on. Yeah,
the Masons go to Northern California.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a lodge there.
Right. No,
is it like the Flintstones where they have to wear the buffalo hats?
Right.
It's just like that. What is that? What the hell is that thing? That's the.
What do they do?
The bisons.
You'll know it when that's exactly. You'll know it when I say it. Russian River.
I'm like, is it like music?
Bohemian Grove. You've heard of Bohemian Grove?
No.
All right, well, that's your Wikipedia
there we go.
assignment for the night. So, well, in a nutshell, as I understand it, again, not part of Bohemian Grove, or am I? That this started as a group of artists and sort of counterculture people back in, 20s or something. Now I think it's a lot of business, heads of business and influential
networking
people. But now, and they get together and they dress up and they have these ceremonies and they just, and it's in the woods, it's along the Russian River and the redwoods and all that. But that's how I feel about the Grand.
More and more fascinating.
No, it's the Grand is so under the radar, so I have to be a little careful about what I say, and not to equate one to the other. But you do feel like this is kind of like the center of this world when you're there, right?
And I think you're right, because a lot of the participants are people that are, like you said, they're known in the car world. But I think what's so interesting, and it comes through in their posts and yours, these are big names, a lot of them.
Yeah.
But everybody just wants to be there and drive the cars. And
right.
just
and that's it.
Enjoy each other's company and the cars. That's really special.
Well, obviously, you don't have to be a big name to be a part of it, and it's more, about the enthusiasm.
Don't sell yourself
just
short.
What you're bringing to the table. It's. But that said, I did get to talk with some amazing people, and came away with a real different sort of perspective on things. I'll say, but to answer that question about a car, this is a question I think they get a lot. It's a question I've answered or asked them, and they've answered, and. From a couple of different board members, I heard the same thing, and they talked about it was Dan, you know this because you've had Jay Ward on the show. The movie Cars. What was the car? Not a Packard. Was it
Hudson Hornet?
Hudson Hornet, right? So someone brought a Hudson Hornet one time or a couple of years, and it had actually race pedigree. I think the Carrera Panamera, but and it had all the period livery and all that, and that was a huge hit, right? You just don't see those that often,
no,
especially not on a 1,000-mile trip. I mean, you literally had Doc Hudson.
No, totally. Someone else said, Ryan, you need to go get a Devon SS. Do you know what a Devon is?
I know what
I've heard of them.
Yeah.
Okay. It's another one of these sort of specials, right? I think that's the impression that I got. They'd like to see more of these sort of these home brew cars, these specials, like these period cars. There's a car called a bow car. Either one of you ever heard of a bow car?
I have not.
It's one
this
of
feels
these
like
cars.
when I learned about a Denzel, where I'm like, how have I not run across
What
this?
is a
even
Denzel?
once? It was a French company.
Oh, okay. Okay, interesting. Well,
there were
Colorado
at one of the Haggerty
company.
events. There were two.
Really? Okay. And the thing is, there was a golden era of these cars, right? Like, that people were taking cars and building bodies, but the bow car was an interesting car because I think the story was that it was from Lakewood, Colorado, right? Like they built a handful of cars. There was another car. I'm going to forget the name of it. It's built on a Mercedes or a Jaguar, but other than the powertrain, this car was built by an 18-year-old kid in his garage, and it was beating Ferraris and Cobras at the time. Well, that's the kind of car you see in the Grand, right? So I think at the end of the day, it's about the person and it's about the story, right?
Nice.
And boy, these cars, like I said, have stories. So you should have caught me like the day after because I was on fire. I I had all the details up here still. I could have just
we'd have had a 5-hour show.
I was going to say, you would have had
show.
the next month's worth of shows and some bonus episodes.
Guys, the come down to my day job, right? Like, how difficult it was to crack open that laptop after a week with these cars and these people on these roads. And, I felt like I was really living. And I think that's at the end of the day what it's all about. So I hope they'll continue to have me back, continue to allow me to be a part of it. I just, because I can't give it up now, right? Like I've seen behind the curtain and
right.
I don't want to leave,
Well, and I think what's so interesting too, it's similar to, you just experienced Car Week for the first time. It sounds like it had a similar impact on you. Obviously you've done the Grand before, but I think what's so interesting too is the Grand had this impact on you after Car Week, and Car Week and Pebble almost becomes a preamble to the Grand, because it's like a preview. You see them and then you go on the Grand and experience the cars doing what they were designed to do. That's really interesting.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it is almost like the I don't know, the story arc or something, right? It was so very fortunate, to be able to do these things. We all are, it's just I don't know. It's just it's what it's all about, right? It's not about punching the clock. It's not about. I know you have to do one to do the other, but
one begets
that's not
the other.
living, guys.
Yeah.
That is not. This is living, and I know I'm not the only one that's been doing some living. I can come back if we have time. I can talk about the cool Rocky Mountain Automotive Press fall 4x4 trip that I took yesterday. Posted some stuff on Instagram. But Dan, you took your own journey, and one that I have always wanted to make. Never have. You and I, and probably Lindsay, I assume, are big fans of the 80s movies and
the stuff of our childhoods.
That's right. Stand By Me, and that was all shot up in your neck of the woods. So.
I know. How was your trip, Dan?
Yeah,
it was immense. So I decided to take a Friday off and do a long weekend drive of nearly 1,000 miles.
Another 1,000 miles. I'm sensing a theme.
Right. Yeah.
What were you driving, Dan? That's
well, I had the Corolla, so the GR Corolla, which obviously doesn't get many miles put on it, so it was a good excuse to get it out and get it out on the roads.
Was this your second road trip in this car too?
It was, yeah. So I did almost like a pre-road trip to the Cascades and did a loop around the Cascade Mountains a few weeks ago, which is why I wasn't on the call with us the other week.
You were missed, but we knew you were having fun.
Yeah, sorry. It was like driving or talking to you guys, and I like both, but yeah.
Well, we all know driving's always going to win.
Yeah, if you got to tee it up, right? Yep. Anyway, there's two locations in Oregon south of me. One is where they filmed most of Stand By Me, which was a Rob Reiner film. And
it's the best film ever made.
It is a legendary film,
Such a classic.
Lindsay, are you a fan, or is this a guy's movie? Like, is this like
No, I like it. I have not seen it in a bit, but I do. Okay. I remember it playing being in the ether growing up and how significant it was.
Yeah.
And it still stands the test of time for me, at least, because I knowing that I was going to the filming locations, I had to rewatch it. Right?
Of course.
And
that's trip prep.
Right, preparation. Well, that was actually night one. So after doing a leg that took me across the top of a mountain range, at one point I looked over to my right and there were clouds below me, which I guess is probably a normal thing in Oregon, in
No way.
Colorado. But
Colorado, yeah.
I was above the clouds driving along, which was immense fun. And then I stopped at Mount Hood, which is one of the mountains in Oregon. Watched the movie that night in preparation. And then the next day drove down to Brownsville, Oregon, which is pretty remote. There's not a lot there, but it was Castle Rock, which was where the kids lived when they went off to find the dead body on the railway tracks. And, you know, so many iconic scenes, different locations in this really, really small town. So if you get the chance to go to Brownsville, Oregon, I highly recommend it. Wasn't full of tourists. You know, working at Dirtfish, we have a lot of the scenes from Twin Peaks.
Right.
And every week we probably have what we call peekers. We probably have 2 or 3 peekers a day coming and looking.
A day?
Whereas a day, yeah. Whereas it was super quiet, this little town, and just great driving roads around. And then the following day, I went to Astoria to go and see the house from the Goonies. So another iconic film from the same era. It used to be when I first moved here, the owner of the Goonies house hated the fact that people wanted to come and see the house.
So it's like the gal that owns the Breaking Bad house, where you're like, did you not know what you were getting into? Yeah.
There were signs. There used to be signs saying, "We will call the police if you trespass." And now you go there, and there are signs that tell you to be respectful, which I totally get.
Yeah.
Right.
But you can go and get really close to the house. The owner wasn't in, but he's got his own TikTok channel where he gets people to do the truffle shuffle outside.
Oh, that's awesome.
Oh my gosh.
Embrace it, Lindsay, to your point, embrace it.
That's so fun.
Check out his TikTok page.
That's so cute. What a great approach.
You're not going to catch me doing that, Dan, but that's...
Well, I think we would out-truffle shuffle him, wouldn't we, in terms of... It'd be too realistic, wouldn't it? So we'll keep people... This is more me than you, Ryan.
No.
Commentary on your...
All right, squad goals. Let's get the whole crew
I know.
there.
I'm like,
Truffle
I feel
shuffle.
like that was just like a challenge accepted, or like the gauntlet's been thrown.
Right? You got to be careful what you say.
Yeah. Hold my beer.
Free T-shirts to anyone that does a truffle shuffle on and tags us on Instagram. There we go.
There you go.
Yeah, there you go.
We'll send you a T-shirt. But so you know, nearly 8,000 miles in 3 days. So over 5 hours a day driving on these roads. Still love the car. I didn't want to stop to take pictures. That's how much I loved the car. Like, I didn't want to get the drone out. I didn't want to stop and take pictures. I just wanted to drive.
Yeah.
And it, you know, for a car that isn't really high performance, I mean, it's a 5-second to 60 car. It's not one of these high performance cars, but it just goes to show that you can still have a lot of fun.
Oh, it's
That's
a great
so
car.
cool.
That's probably the perfect car for that, yeah.
No, I mean, it's such a nice confirmation where you confirm to yourself that you made the right choice and that you are loving it even more and you want to drive more.
Yeah, I just got to get it clean now.
And let me guess, Dan, I bet the differential light didn't come on
Not
once.
once. Not once.
See,
but that could be more of a commentary on my driving. But I was giving it the beans, to be honest.
Yeah. Nice. That's one of those trips I've always wanted to take. You know, I still really, really love the Goonies. I loved it when I was a kid. Stand By Me is even, I put that even above the Goonies because I just think it's a special movie. It's a perfect movie. And when I watch it now, it's a very different movie to me.
Definitely.
Than when I was younger. I see a different layer there, you know, now that I'm, you know, my late 40s, you know, and I saw that the first time when I was about 12. I saw it in the movie theater, and I think it was my first rated R movie, and my parents had seen it before, and they said, this is such a good movie. You're at the age you should see this, you know. And
we can make it work.
We can make, and I remember being pissed off because at the movie theater next to us was Ghostbusters, and the people over there seemed to be having a great time, right? You know, but
you're like, what's this movie with a message nonsense? Let's go bust some ghosts.
You know? But I think Stand By Me has held up a lot better than even Ghostbusters, although that's still pretty good. And it's just a special movie. And those classic locations, you know, I've just told myself since I was 12, I wanted to go see those places. And I understand that most of the places are still there, except for the country store, I think, collapsed in on itself a couple years ago and they tore it down. And that would have been neat to see. But all the houses are still there.
The things that were missing, the tree house wasn't there, but you could see the tree that the tree house was mounted to. So you could get the shape of the tree and everything. But the scene with the gun, that was just exactly the same. There were two cars parked there, but exactly the same. The scene where they come out of the bar and he steals the hat. Yeah. Exactly the same.
Oh, that was a powerful scene.
Yeah. If you get the chance, come visit.
That sounds like the excuse and invitation you've been waiting for, Ryan.
That's right. That's right. Make sure you know the secret knock, though. So
yeah,
exactly.
Well, that's awesome, Dan. I just that's the kind of stuff these adventures and stuff are wonderful, but that's a trip I've wanted to take my whole life. I've never done it. It's just I don't know. I need to complete the circle there. It's someone and I asked you if you found I said if you found the penny, right? Was it the last scene? Was it a penny or was it a nickel? I can't remember.
For a penny jar, isn't he? And he finds
That's right. He's looking for a penny jar, and then at the end, was it a penny? Is that what he finds on the street?
Yeah, I think it is. Hey, look, guys, I found a penny, right?
And I think that someone has actually glued a penny to that point in the street. So the next time you go, the next time we go, we have to
a reason to go back
for that
road trip.
Right, just a beautiful part of the world too. And is it Cannon Beach where they do the final scene of the Goonies? Did you make it up that far?
I did, yeah. So that's obviously on the coast, just south of Astoria, but it's got this haystack rock in the middle of the water. Yeah. Which at low tide you can walk out to. But so many iconic scenes from our youth, right? And a lot of them were filmed in those areas.
Yeah. And as I understand, I've never really been to that part of the world, but that coastline along Oregon and Washington State is really undeveloped relative to most of the coastline in the States, right? It's pretty rugged yet and
it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So, Dan, does that make you, if the people that stop at Dirtfish are peakers, does that make you a stander?
Or a goonie.
Or a goonie?
Just a goon, I think.
A goon. Yeah. You can choose the nickname you feel that you like the best.
Yeah.
Goonies never say die, right? So
exactly.
That's awesome. Lindsay, what have you been up to since we last met? We had a great conversation with Brett.
I know. That was so much fun. It was great to catch up with him. And of course, it's a good excuse to just see the people that you admire and get to know them and hang out.
And he really is someone I think we all admire. I mean, I just think he's got it figured. I'm sure he works his butt off, but I mean, he does. He's living the life that he's got it figured out, I think. And what a neat guy, interesting guy. We could have talked with him the rest of the day.
Definitely. Well, and that's like you said, I mean, that's one of the things that has stood out to me about him the last few car weeks as he is actually actively, visibly working throughout the week. The last two Pebbles, he's the first one down onto the platform making notes and then going back into the suite and writing his articles. And it's very cool and inspiring and loved getting to chat with him.
Yeah, he's really just a neat guy. And I guess that's kind of a segue into what I did yesterday, if you guys want to talk about it.
Yes, I want to hear all about it.
Yeah, Rocky Mountain Automotive Press. Well, I thought I would show up like a professional, and so I asked my wife if we had a notebook and a pen I could take with me. Well, the notebook and the pen we had was about this big, and I then proceeded to leave it in every car that we drove and had to go track it down each time. Never wrote one note down. It's all up here. But
it's all in the appearances.
It's all up here. But we have this, it's a great group. It's called Rocky Mountain Automotive Press, and as the name says, it's for people, kind of that aren't in your neck of the woods and aren't, East Chicago and that part of the country. And it is our professional organization, and they're the ones that line us up with press fleets and OEM reps and all the rest. And so throughout the year, there are some events. The last one I did was an overnight on-road event. It was more car-oriented. That's the one I think we all walked away having a newfound appreciation for the Miata, of all things.
Right.
A lot of electric cars. Well, this was the 4x4 event, and so I think it
sounds like so much fun.
Well, it was so cool. I don't do that. I can take my car and drive on the road. That's all wonderful and great, and it's always fun, as we've talked about, to beat on someone else's car, right?
Yeah.
Not that we beat on anything, but to drive it with with spirit.
Enjoy the vehicles.
That's right. And so this was something I don't own a 4x4. It's something I've only done a handful of times in my life, and we have these wonderful driving roads, but we have these wonderful trails, and I got to say, I'm kind of hooked because it's a very relaxed. I mean, yes, you're doing some crazy terrain. You have to know what you're doing, and there's some exposure and other things. But it's a way you can really kind of drive and still see the scenery, and the leaves are changing and all that. So Toyota was there, Lexus was there, Kia, Subaru, and Land Rover. And
so what did you get to drive?
So Land Rover had the Defender in the County Heritage or whatever it is livery. I'd actually driven this car before. It's in the local press fleet or whatever, but it's this beautiful blue car, light blue car, kind of robin's egg blue with the white steel wheels. So good. It's got air ride. That air ride, I guess I hadn't really appreciated it the last time I drove it. That thing is awesome. Like, it's got such a great ride. I ragged on it a little bit the last time for some of the steering feel. It felt a little old-fashioned compared to some of the other stuff, but you realize what it's made for. It's the real deal. And when you are off-road, that is the vehicle that you want. That said, there wasn't a bad one in the bunch. I guess the cars that people were probably least interested in driving, Kia had a Sorento. It's whatever their off-road trim level of is, the Sorento, but it's obviously not a truck in the same way that some of these other vehicles are. But you know what? It made it through everything the other cars did.
That's impressive.
It really was.
I wouldn't have put that up against a Defender. I wouldn't think of them in the same class.
No. And there were parts where, in the Defender, you could roll over something. In the Kia, you'd have to have a spotter to make sure that you didn't get caught up. I mean, you just don't
different
have
ground clearance,
right, among other things. And then at least that was on off-road tires. We had a Forester that was on street tires, and that was the one car I think I didn't drive, just didn't get a chance. I kept coming back to the Land Rover, just because there are things about a car like that don't necessarily make sense on the street that really make sense when you're on a trail. And it's things like having a car that's narrow enough that you're not worried about scraping on rocks, that kind of thing. It's got air suspension. It brings it up, I think, an additional 6 inches. It's a substantial amount. So you're not hitting anything in the underbody in that vehicle.
And you can accommodate whatever you come across. It gives you the confidence of knowing you're not going to get stuck anywhere, and you can.
It really does. Even those steel wheels, and I know they're not cheap because they're Land Rover, steel wheels, but, you worry a little bit less about those, right, when you're on the trail. You can repaint them if you had to, whatever,
True.
The visibility over the hood and being able to place the vehicle, especially when you're right on the edge of a cliff or something, right? You don't want to be in a big, wide vehicle. You don't want to be in a Hummer, or something like that,
That's true. It's also funny. I don't think of Defenders as being narrow, but you're right. When you compare it to a Hummer,
relative
it is.
To some of the other.
Well, and it felt narrow enough to you where it wasn't a stress, which is interesting.
No, that's it. And obviously some of the other OEMs, the solution is big, wide track tires and all that, and that's great as a pre-runner, but on the trail it's a little something different. So Toyota had they had two Tacomas. I'm gonna screw this up. One was is it the SR5? Do they still make the SR5?
Yeah.
It's another trim level that's it's maybe kind of more in the middle than. But the one that everyone really wanted to drive was something called the Trail Hunter. And as the wonderful rep from Toyota said, that everyone thinks they want the TRD Pro, right? And even here in Colorado, you don't see a 4Runner or Taco that isn't a TRD Pro. But something I never thought about, the TRD Pro is really more of a pre-runner, right? So more of an open range type car. And we didn't have a vehicle that was really a trail vehicle. And so that Trail Hunter is it. And so it's got some aftermarket bits. This is another interesting thing in the automotive world, the OEM. Companies like ARB and Old Man Emu, who are respected off-road brands, who are partnering with OEMs, and so you can buy cars new with those parts installed, right? Where historically they'd be rebranded or they'd be in-house parts, and so that's really changed the game. So this Trail Hunter has these amazing shocks. It's got 33-inch tires, right? It's got, and here's the best part. So all the Tacomas now, as I understand, they're no longer the 6 cylinders. They're all 4 cylinders, but they're turbo, and they have a mild hybrid system. So this one I drove was 360 horsepower. And the most amazing thing about this, guys, is that it's got a snorkel that comes up above the passenger side.
And that's standard?
Standard. And when you have the window down, you hear the turbo, you hear the blow-off valve. It sounds like you're rolling coal, right? It's got that sort of sound of the intake, and it's in the, you come off the gas and all that. And it sounded good though. I mean, I don't know,
it enhanced the experience.
It did. If you didn't want to hear it, you rolled up the window, kind of thing. Despite the 360 horsepower, I wouldn't say it was quick. And I know a couple of people on the trip said, well, I'd rather have the Ranger Raptor for the same price point. It's appreciably quicker. That said, at Toyota, I mean, some of the things that I haven't appreciated about Toyota is like the seat design. The seats were never comfortable for me, have been addressed in this latest generation of Toyota, which is cool.
Because that can make it or break it.
Make it or break it. They also brought the new Land Cruiser. So I'd never driven the new Land Cruiser. I think that's...
So what did you think?
I love it. I absolutely love it. I love the way it looks. That has the 6-cylinder configuration, as does the Lexus Twin. Is it the GX?
I was going to say, do they share the same platform?
They do. They do.
Yeah.
And they look very, very similar. It's sort of like, well, what? Pick your poison.
I think they look more similar than previous pairs
really
have.
do.
Like this is the most similar.
Yep.
And it's about like 10K, I think, extra for the Lexus. You pay about a 10K premium.
Yeah. And
for
what
the badges.
do you get, right? You know, well, you get a larger screen. It's an appreciably larger screen. You get the leather, and it's a different. You get what you pay for. But they drove obviously very similarly. I think they were probably tuned a little different suspension wise and all that, but both really great vehicles. I guess I was just kind of drawn to the Toyota, just a little more. I don't know, the purity, I guess, of what it is. It's the legacy, the history of the brand and all that. And you can argue it's not a real Land Cruiser or whatever, but it's a great vehicle. Also a very, very compliant ride. I was shocked at how good they've got the ride on those things. And also the Trail Hunter, great on the street too. You don't get the body roll of right? Like they're really, really capable on the street. And again, I don't want to dismiss the Subaru, the Forester, because it was amazingly capable. And, one of the suggestions I had for the Subaru rep was, I don't think people know how capable these cars are, and they get, a bad rap, right? You see,
or they're not thought of. It's not top of mind. Yeah.
Right. And maybe you need to do something like Land Rover does or used to do, where if you were an owner, you could do a 1-day driving workshop, right? And you really learned the capabilities of the car, and you knew you weren't going to get into too much trouble on your own or whatever. So
and they have those off-road like obstacles set up, and you get to experience what it feels like, so that
you're not going to
you
damage
actually go out and
anything.
use the car.
Yeah. You need that comfort level, right?
Yeah. So how did you, because it sounds like there were trucks and SUVs, did you have a preference when you were off-road, one or the other style?
Yeah, so I definitely prefer the smaller vehicles on the trails, because I don't want to be the guy that scrapes up the side of a car. And when it's not yours, you don't want to do that.
I was going to say, it's not yours.
It's not yours. Obviously, when we got into the rough stuff, everyone was glad when they were in the Defender or in one of the Toyotas or whatever. That said, the Kia and the Subaru, I mean, they did everything the others did. It's just, they're more road oriented, right?
It's more of a hybrid in that sense, as opposed to an off-road vehicle.
More of a crossover. Yeah. And I think those are probably the better choices for most people for most of what they do. But I have to say, I just kept coming back to the Land Rover, to the Defender.
Did you feel like that was because of the overall, like when you look at the cabin experience too, because you're obviously having the driving experience and the steering feel and all of that, but the appointments make a difference to your experience. Did you feel like that played into it?
They do. It did have some quirks. I wouldn't say it was the best infotainment system, but I love the way it looks. Yeah. And now it's a few years old too, right? You're comparing this against brand new cars. I love the air suspension. I love that with a touch of the button, you can raise the thing.
That's a really nice feature. And how you said it had air ride, so describe how that compared to, like, what was the difference that made for you?
Honestly, no, I've never driven one with the standard suspension, but it felt the closest thing to it was this Toyota, the Trail Hunter, that was on these aftermarket, effectively, and big tires. But yet the Defender has relatively narrow wheels and tires, right? They don't stick out past the car. It's just, it's kind of everything you need, nothing you don't. But it's horses for courses, right? And for, the tight Colorado trails, right? I mean, that's where of course, the price point's quite a bit higher too, I think. So that's something to think about. And do you really want to take your expensive new Land Rover off-road? I don't know.
You get one that's a couple of years old, so you don't have to worry about it. You split the difference.
I love the thing. It's not the best car around town, but for where we were, what we were doing, it got the most looks. It's the car that everyone wanted for their photos in front of them. It just looked like it belonged, right? The Toyotas are right there too, but What a fun day. It was just great. And, it's almost like there's this whole world that exists up in the mountains that you're just not privy to. And when you realize, I can connect this town and that town by going on this old mining trail, and, you go past these old ruins, and we ran into one mountain man. I put it, if you saw my Instagram and you saw the picture of the guy that looked like he was holding a gun in his hand, that was a guy who did not like the idea of 8 or 10 of these cars going past his house on a trail. I don't think he owns the road, so don't think he had much say in it. But he was not happy to see us. And
you had the true off-road experience.
We did,
authentic.
And he had junk in his yard like you wouldn't believe. He had, I think, he had snowmobiles. He had dogs running around. He was not happy to see us. And I swear, I thought he had a pistol in his hand, and it was. I think what he had was a combination of a cell phone and right. But it was, thank God, it was a combination of a cell phone and I think a remote control for his TV. So he was talking on the phone, and he must have, he's probably calling the cops or something. Again, this is a county road, So what are you going to do? But it was awesome. It was exactly what I needed, just to take my mind off some other things going on, and kind of made
sounds
me
like a really cool day.
It was awesome. And so, now I want a press car. I want that Land Rover, or I want one of those Toyotas or something, and I want to go do some off-roading, because it's have you had much experience doing off-roading at all?
No, when I was little, in one of the Broncos, we did one time. I remember, in the Broncos, you have to get out and lock the hubs to put it in four-wheel drive. So I remember my dad getting out and locking the hubs, and I remember skidding a little bit before we did that. And it was really cool, but I haven't had any experience since then. But you're right. It's a reminder that, the mountains and all of those mining roads are back there, but it's easy to get caught up in daily life and not make the effort.
Yeah.
I took the Cayenne Turbo off-roading when I had it.
How was that?
You had that. Yeah, that was a quick chapter.
2019 Cayenne Turbo, and shout out to Martin Wild, who's from the Porsche Club here. He organises once a year an off-roading event mainly for obviously modified Cayennes, but we did it on the eastern side of Washington. 2 days of it wasn't like seriously like no one got stuck, but
you weren't really off-roading then.
Right. No ropes and winches were involved during the.
I guess
course
neither
of the
were
2
we
days.
then, but
Right.
Yeah, so we were just going out for a drive, I guess. But it was cool roads, amazing scenery, and all the cars coped and got through. One guy had whatever the Jeep is with that big engine. Is it a 492? Jeep about 3 or 4 years ago decided to put some crazy engine in it. So we made him the sweeper.
Is it like a Raptor-esque type?
Yeah, that sort of thing. So he was the sweeper because even though he owned Porsches, he didn't bring a Porsche. So we made him go at the back. And But yeah, that was a great trip and a lot of fun. Maybe not the right tool for the job, but it still passed the test.
Well, that kind of makes it even more fun because you're like, look how capable it is.
Yeah, I just didn't want to damage it.
No, I know. And I get that.
That's understandable.
Yeah. It's a lot of commitment, right? For a very specialized sort of thing, but also a good reminder that it's not just Porsches and Ferraris, right? Like the car scene, the automotive enthusiast scene is really all encompassing. Whether you're in a 30s Alpha or a brand new Toyota Trailhunter.
Well, and what a contrast for you, Ryan, too, with the cars that you experienced, right next, very close together.
What's next? Motorcycles? That's something I haven't done much with. So I tell my wife. Yes, that's right. Sidecar racing. Ever seen that? Guys,
that's crazy. Yeah,
incredible. So
I don't know about racing. I feel like those just driving around are enough.
Yeah, no, I know. It's
we need the roadshow motorcycle with a sidecar.
That's right. Well, I guess that's probably a show, huh? It was good to talk with you guys.
Yeah, it's great to see you guys and catch up.
Yeah, I look forward to talking again soon. We've got some cool guests coming up. Not in our next show, but I think the show after. We've got Jay from Sheffield Watches, so that's going to be a lot of fun. So,
should we do a wrist check? Who's got it?
Hey, Dan. I'll Photoshop. Hey, that's right.
Without any planning too. I think it's worth saying we all just keep showing up in our Sheffields.
This is my go-to, and I love that it this one
matches your shirt.
Matches the shirt.
It does. It's perfect.
Which, by the way, we need to order some more shirts. I like these shirts. Gotta get the word out a little bit more. But
talk about illustrating how crazy Car Week is. I never connected with mine.
No, you never got your shirt.
Dan, did you get yours?
No.
Oh, you didn't?
I think Ryan gave them away to fans, right?
That was all Alan. Yeah, that was. That's
funny?
Right. The groupies were lining up for them.
Right.
Yeah.
But no, can't wait to talk with Jay, and it's exciting to see what he's doing. I saw the new or the reissue, right, of the
Spikes
SCR
one.
watch, which I've seen that now in a couple wrists out in the wild. I don't own that one. I hadn't seen it. That is an awesome watch. Yes, I know that Spike is our competition, but we like him and we like them we like the watch. That watch is awesome. It's just that's just one of those watches that just looks right, just sets right in your wrist, and
it looks so good in the pictures, and that makes me realize I've never seen one in person. Actually,
it's so good. It's so good. So I'd like to get one of those. But so. All right. Yeah. Well, thank you all. I hope Alan's having a great time.
He was missed, but we'll see him next time.
He was missed, absolutely, but great talking with you too. Like I said, some great shows in the hopper. So stay tuned. Make sure you follow us online, Instagram at The Road Show Podcast, and us individually. And until next time, I'm Ryan.
I'm Lindsay.
I'm Dan.
Thanks,
and
guys.
Also for Alan, we're The Road Show. Thanks.
See you soon.